In today's video, we're exploring another potential Oilers goalie trade. This time, could we see a deal between the Philadelphia Flyers? We're going to take a look and review a proposal here from the Hockey News on a potential trade that could involve both these two teams. We also have some trade rumors around the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Ottawa Senators. We got more information on the Corey Perry situation with Chicago, but it doesn't really clear things up. In my opinion, it makes things a lot more confusing. We also have updates from Vancouver with a new signing, news from the waiver wire, including a waiver claim, and Marc-Andre Fleury made headlines again last night regarding that special mask. We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today, lots of different types of news stories. Yesterday in our video, we talked a bit about Marc-Andre Fleury and a special mask that he had made for Native American Heritage Night in Minnesota. And it was my understanding at the time of the recording that he was not going to wear the mask. Unfortunately, the league had told him he couldn't do it. He offered to pay a fine, and once they were told that, they said that they were going to offer a significant fine to the team if he did wear it. So it was believed as much as he wanted to wear it and was going to pay the fine himself, he didn't want to bring any hardship onto the team itself or cause the owners or anybody to have to pay a big amount of money for that. But I assume somebody must have told him to go ahead and they were prepared to face the consequences, because Marc-Andre Fleury did go against policy last night in the NHL and kind of bucked the Gary Bettman rule here and wear the mask anyway. And the latest I've heard is that the league is not expected to intervene and fine either the player or the team. Personally, I like the approach here when the league is being ridiculous with some of these policies, just like we saw with the Pride tape. If the players go against it and do something to support a good cause, I don't really see how the league can come in and fine the player or the team. It's just really bad PR, really bad optics, and I just don't see them doing that. I'd like to see some change and some change of policy here, to be honest. I understand last year with the Pride jerseys, which was the kind of the tipping point, there was only a couple of players, I think there was maybe 3 or 4, I don't remember exactly, maybe a half dozen at most in the league who actually publicly spoke out saying they didn't want to wear the Pride jerseys. Okay, I get that. But they kind of, in my opinion, in an effort to make people not be uncomfortable and they're kind of going the opposite route here. They're just kind of banning everything, taking it all away, which is not necessary. They did it with the Pride tape. Now they've reversed policy there. Obviously, they went against Fleury went against the grain here and doesn't get punished. So really, I think just let the players do what they want. At the end of the day, that's what's best. If somebody doesn't want to participate in a particular cause, then don't. It's just that simple, and that's the best way to keep things so that people are happy and nobody's getting uncomfortable. But it's nice to see Fleury kind of do what he wanted and the league not to respond. I think it's the right thing. We also have a signing in Vancouver. They've extended forward Nils Aman. He gets a 2-year deal at $825,000. They certainly see him as being a very useful bottom 6 player. So he gets a pretty decent contract extension there. Former NHLer Nick Ritchie, who did attempt to get back to the NHL this year. He attended training camp with the St. Louis Blues, but did not get a contract offer, did not make the team. He's opted to play over in Finland. He signed a contract in a Finnish league for the rest of the season. We do have an NHL waiver claim, and it makes a lot of sense after what we saw last night. The New York Islanders today have claimed defenseman Mike Reilly on waivers. Of course, formerly of the Florida Panthers. The Panthers placed him on waivers, of course, yesterday. Some speculation they may be making room on the roster for Patrick Kane. We won't know more about that probably for a couple more days. We should get some clarity on the Kane situation here probably, I'd say, Monday, Tuesday. But for right now, the Islanders put in a claim and picked up Mike Reilly. They lost a couple of defensemen in their game last night against the Ottawa Senators. And before the end of the first period even, they lost Adam Pelech and Sebastian Aho to injury. Neither returned to the game. And today the Islanders announced that Adam Pelech was going to be out longer term and was placed on long-term injured reserve. So it's a big loss for them. Certainly he's one of their stronger defensemen defensively. And Reilly will come in. He's a different style of defenseman, but at least he's got a decent amount of NHL experience, good skater. But for the most part has been kind of a fringe player for the past few years. But based on the contract and what's available, it was easier than making a trade for sure. So going down 2D last night was tough, but they got through it. They picked up the win, and then they got Reilly today. He's not going to be available to play with them tonight, but should join the team here in the coming days. Now, the Corey Perry situation. Hard to understand what in the heck is going on there. We did get news from the team and from the player side of it today, and you would think things would be a lot more clear, but they're not. They're a lot more, to me, more confusing than ever, and it makes you think and kind of feel that somebody may not be being completely honest here, but it's we may not know, and we may not know for some time what is going on here. But the Hawks had GM Kyle Davidson speak to the situation, and he said this happened first. When Davidson was speaking to the media, he said that Corey Perry was going to be away from the team for the foreseeable future. It was definitely the organization's decision, not the player, and that he wasn't going to be commenting on it any further. He was specifically asked if this was related to like asset management in terms of, having him sit out to be traded. And he didn't say no. He didn't say yes either. All he said was to rule out things like that right now would be irresponsible. It's an interesting answer. So he didn't come out and say it has nothing to do with trade. He didn't say he's being punished. So we really still don't know. It's bizarre because Corey Perry had practiced the day before, was doing line rushes in his normal spot, plus on special teams in the power play. And then, morning skate comes around. He's there, and then all of a sudden they go for warm-up that night to play. He's not there. And then he sits out, and he's been gone from the team ever since. The players seem to be in the dark. I don't know if they actually know anything or not. And if they do, they're certainly not acting like it. Even head coach Luke Richardson doesn't seem to know much. It's a bizarre situation. But then a little while later, after the Kyle Davidson media availability, Corey Perry's agent, Pat Morris, put out a statement saying that Perry has stepped away from the team to attend to personal matters and that Corey and his family would appreciate privacy at this time. Okay, well that kind of contradicts what the team has said. This says that Corey stepped away from the team, not that the organization is making him step away from the team, and that he wants some privacy and it's a personal matter. If the team would come out and say it's a personal matter and whatever, then nobody would be asking questions right now. It wouldn't be confusing. But they've made it sound like this is their choice, that he is healthy, so he's considered a healthy scratch. It just doesn't make any sense. And when he was asked about, if it's trade related, he didn't deny it, but he didn't confirm it either. It's just getting more bizarre. I mean, at this point, we shouldn't expect Corey Perry to be back in Chicago, maybe ever, at least not for now. I don't know. Did something change? Is there some kind of conflict amongst the player and the team? I don't know. I mean, if there's anything that was like, if this was a personal or family, like health situation, or if it was a case of, like a legal matter, you would think that there'd be some sort of news and somebody would say something. You don't have to go into great detail, of course, but it's just bizarre. Completely bizarre. Now, like I said, the agent says he stepped away. The team says that he's stepped away because they've asked him to. So it doesn't make any sense. Will he be traded? Maybe. Could he go on waivers? I guess. Could they decide to mutually terminate the contract and make him a free agent? I guess that's possible too, although I can't see Corey Perry, if he has anything to do with it, why he'd want to walk away from the $4 million, because he certainly was, along with some of the other couple of players like Foligno, they were overpaid to go to Chicago and be veteran insulators for Connor Bedard. And I thought he was doing a pretty good job. It just doesn't make sense why all of a sudden that they would just want him to go away. So I don't know if we'll get any further clarity on that, but it sounds like he's pretty well done in Chicago, and that they're not going to talk about it. And for a team who preached about, being more transparent and open and honest with their fan base, this just smells funny. I mean, we know that they're a team that's hard to give your full trust to because of what they've covered up in the past. I know there's different people running the organization. I'm not suggesting that they're covering anything up here because I don't know that. It just, because of their past, it makes you question things. It's just really bizarre. So we'll see what happens, but still no further clarity in my opinion, more confusing times than we were before on this matter. A few other trade talks around the NHL before we get into the Oilers goalie trade I want to look at. And last night's telecast between the Islanders and Senators. Sens reporter Bruce Garriock, the Ottawa Sun and TSN, was talking during the intermission about some moves we might see. Of course, right now the Senators are cap compliant. The Thomas Chabot hand injury, which put him on long-term injury reserve, gave him some much-needed cap flexibility for a while, but he's nearing a return. He's not eligible to return until next Monday, and it is expected he's, unless barring a setback, will return at that time. I believe that's when they face the Blue Jackets, if I'm not mistaken. But at that point, Chabot, he's already been skating in a non-contact jersey. I believe today he moved to a regular jersey. He's been shooting the puck more, so I think his hand is feeling pretty good, and it's getting close to 100%. So by the time he's eligible to come off LTIR, he likely will be up to it and ready to roll, which is going to cause them to be kind of back into a more difficult salary cap situation. Of course, at this point, when Ridley Gregg and Marcus Selleck are still out, they shouldn't be out too much longer. They may be out maybe a little bit longer than Chabot, but not a whole lot. So there's still a little bit of flexibility given their situations. But in the not too distant future, they're going to be back facing a cap crunch, and they're going to be preparing for, at that point, for the return of Shane Pinto, who needs to be signed. And of course, that's not going to come until the new year, but they're still going to be, preparing for it. Now, of course, somebody's going to have to likely leave town. There was a lot of chatter about Matthew Joseph before the season started in the training camp time frame. And at this point, I'd be shocked if it was Joseph, given how well he's played this year. I know he wasn't even mentioned by Bruce Garriock. Garriock mentioned some teams had called and inquired on Drake Batherson, but he said the team has no interest in moving him. So those talks didn't go anywhere, but the more likely player that he sees likely getting dealt would be Dominic Kubalik, of course, who came over from Chicago, formerly of Chicago, came over from Detroit in the Alex DeBrincat trade this past offseason. So far, Kubalik, he's been okay. He's got 4 goals in the season. He's only playing third-line minutes, though, which is not ideal for him. He's more of a shooting threat, and they've got a deep enough lineup that he's not getting top 6 minutes, so it's tough for him to produce on the third-line level. He's not seeing a ton of power play, a little bit on power play number 2, and at this point, he's a pending UFA. He's making the right amount of money to give him some flexibility, $2.5 million. There's definitely would be some interest out there amongst other teams, and he's likely not going to re-sign. So it makes more sense if he's the odd man out, and that's what Garriock believes is likely going to happen as they get healthy and create some space to get Pinto into the lineup once he's eligible to come off his suspension early in the new year. So we'll have to keep an eye on things there. And Columbus apparently has interest in Elias Lindholm of the Calgary Flames. Certainly the Flames are in a better shape than they were a couple of weeks ago. They've had a bit of a much better record and winning some games lately, so they're kind of back in the thick of things, of kind of slowing down the trade talk, you could say. But they still have lots of pending unrestricted free agents who are, unlikely to doubtful to return next year. So even if the team has things turned around and is trending in a more positive record, I don't know that they're going to, allow themselves to take all these players into the playoffs and risk losing them all for nothing. That doesn't seem to make sense. That doesn't appear to be part of Craig Conroy's plan as a GM. So Elias Lindholm, of course, in Columbus would be the target. They desperately need help at center ice. He has, former chemistry with a former teammate, Johnny Gaudreau there. Could be, him, Gaudreau, and Tkachuk were at one point the best line in hockey. Those two to be reunited wouldn't be a terrible idea. So I understand the interest. It makes a lot of sense in some capacities, but the thing with Lindholm is he's going to be looking for a major payday. I'm not sure how Columbus feels about that, and does he view Columbus as a better option than Calgary? He certainly seems like he's interested in getting in a more, winning situation, and going from Calgary to Columbus isn't an upgrade right now. So I'm not sure that he would want to. They could obviously trade him without his consent because he doesn't have that protection, but whether or not he re-signs is another story. So we'll see, but apparently there is interest from Columbus, which totally makes sense. They need help at center ice real bad. And lastly, I want to take a look at a potential trade here. This one comes from the Hockey News, a suggested deal to help solve the Edmonton Oilers' goaltending woes. Of course, we know Jack Campbell was a huge part of the problem, who's now down in the minors, and as Elliot Friedman's reported on multiple occasions, as much as they, part of them might want the contract of Campbell to go away, it's going to be very expensive to make that happen. So their first and option here and preferred situation to solve this is for Campbell to go to the minors, to refine his game, get back on track, and come back to the NHL and help the team win games, rather than do a trade, because it's going to be costly. Apparently, while Campbell's been in the AHL, he's requested to have Manny Legacy join him. Apparently, he did work with him in the offseason, former goaltending coach of the Red Wings, and he's going to be going down to Bakersfield to spend some time with Campbell and kind of help him work on his game and kind of help get him back on track, hopefully. So at some point, bringing Campbell back to the NHL roster is certainly a preferred outcome if Edmonton gets its way, because it's going to be so expensive to move him. Of course, they could still use some help, though. Stuart Skinner is still inconsistent, right? And as much as they like Skinner, they may have to trade him, depending on what the deal is that they find. And that's why I don't think that you're going to see the Oilers rush into a trade. They don't want to do a deal that they're going to regret for several years to come. But this Hockey News trade suggests the Philadelphia Flyers and the Edmonton Oilers connect on a deal involving Carter Hart. Now, we know Carter Hart has got a bit more experience than Skinner. He's been around the league a little longer. He's an Alberta native and certainly has had pretty good pedigree. At one point, he was kind of considered the front runner to be the goaltender for Team Canada at the next international competition between Carter Hart, Jordan Binnington, Mackenzie Blackwood, probably the main options right now for Canada in that sense. And, Hart's been in a situation before at the lower levels. So I think he'd be up for the task again. He's had a pretty good season with the Flyers. Even last year on a not-so-great team, didn't do too badly. So the suggested trade, though, involves the Flyers wanting Skinner, not Campbell. Now, I know some of the other trades we've looked at and talked about had teams taking the Campbell contract, but getting several assets in return for taking it. And of course, the Oilers, like I said, but prefer not to do that because they don't want to have to give away the farm just to get rid of that bad contract right now. So if they trade it, a combination of Stuart Skinner along with picks and prospects, we don't know exactly what would have to be involved, but it wouldn't be as much as what you'd have to pay to get rid of the Campbell contract in exchange for Carter Hart. So maybe you have Skinner, maybe one first-round pick, and maybe one prospect. That might be enough to get it done. I don't know what the asking price is going to be from Philadelphia for Hart. Certainly it's going to be not cheap because he is a good young goaltender for sure. How many assets they're looking for, it's not quite clear right now, but we do know that the Philadelphia Flyers are willing to entertain conversations on a variety of players. Even though they've had a decent season, they do understand that there's moves and more business to be made, and that not, just because they're in a situation of doing okay, doesn't mean they're not going to wheel and deal here to make this team better long-term for the future. And like I said, they've made it clear before, they're open and willing to listen on Carter Hart, and him going to the Oilers could be a major upgrade. Now, you would think that a Carter Hart-Stuart Skinner tandem would be better than the alternative. Because if Campbell has to play at the NHL level, if he can come back, but if he is no better than before, even if he's not playing all the time and playing more of a backup role to Hart, it's still somebody you're going to have a difficult time trusting for those games he has to play, right? Skinner is inconsistent, but he's had more good games than Campbell recently. And you'd hate to give up on a young netminder, especially where he has a bit of a local product. Lots of reasons to like the local flavor in that sense, but in some ways too, sometimes playing in your hometown or playing for your hometown team is very difficult. And going to another market where you can kind of ride under the radar a little bit might not be the most terrible idea for Skinner from just from a mental health standpoint and just from being able to kind of, focus on your game more and not deal with such intense media scrutiny that comes from playing in a hot Canadian market. It's not easy, and some players kind of benefit from getting away from it. So we'll see, but let me know your thoughts on a potential big trade involving two goalies here between the Flyers and the Oilers. Could a trade of Stuart Skinner along with a couple of assets, including picks and prospects, for Carter Hart make sense for the Edmonton Oilers? Would you do that deal? If you're the Flyers, what are you asking for exactly in return besides Skinner? Would you take, say, a first-round pick and a good prospect? Is that going to be enough, or is the Flyers going to need more than that? I don't know if they already have the Cal Peterson contract. I don't think they'd want to take the Campbell contract as well. Now, there could be other teams that might take Campbell, Again, you're going to have to pay a pretty price to do it. The Edmonton Oilers might prefer to ride out this year with Campbell and maybe buy him out in the offseason. It would be a costly buyout longer term, but, you know, do you want to sacrifice a little bit of cap space or do you want to sacrifice assets? Take your pick. It's not easy and not really ideal either way, but let me know your thoughts on this latest goalie trade idea from the Hockey News down in the comments and discuss further. Of course, if you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.